Philadelphia Experiment, 1943. It was the darkest period of World War II. Beneath the silent passage of merchant ships across the Atlantic, death prowled unseen. German submarines, hidden in the depths, hunted down convoys one by one, turning the ocean into a battlefield. The United States was exploring every possible scientific path to gain superiority from atomic energy to radar technology. Experiments were being conducted that pushed the very limits of human imagination. In those days, the line between science and madness had almost disappeared. Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, Pennsylvania. Here, in a secluded harbor far from prying eyes, the U.S. Navy was working on a new project. Its official name, Project Rainbow. But history would remember it by another name, the Philadelphia Experiment. At the shipyards in Philadelphia, a new destroyer named the USS Eldridge was being built. The plan was to render the vessel invisible to radar by using powerful electromagnetic fields. The aim was simple: bend enemy radar signals so the ship could not be detected. The Navy described the experiment as electromagnetic camouflage, but whispers behind closed doors spoke of something far stranger. Some engineers claimed the ship might become invisible not only to radar, but to the naked eye as well. The project's theoretical foundation rested on Albert Einstein's unified field theory, a proposal that gravity and the electromagnetic force could be described within a single mathematical framework. If those two forces could be united, it might be possible to warp the very fabric of space-time. And if space-time could be bent, even light might be redirected. In other words, an object could vanish completely from an observer's field of vision. The idea captivated the military imagination of the era. If a ship could be erased from radar and, effectively, made to disappear from an enemy's sight, the balance of warfare could be overturned. Yet to test such a dangerous experiment out at sea, on board a vessel with dozens of people aboard, bordered on madness. July 1943. An eerie silence hung over the Philadelphia Naval Yard. A security perimeter had been established around the docks. Journalists and civilians were kept at a distance. Personnel had signed strict secrecy oaths. Thick cables were wrapped around the USS Eldridge, and massive generators were mounted on its deck. The cables snaked along the hull, disappearing deep inside the ship. Radio transmitters, magnetic coils, electrical converters, all were ready to unleash an amount of energy beyond human comprehension. Some of the crew taking part in the experiment had no real idea what they were signing up for. They were simply told, "This test is meant to deceive enemy radar. There's nothing to fear." But that day, several civilians near the harbor claimed to have witnessed something different. Years later, their testimonies would be recorded as follows. The ship suddenly became enveloped in a greenish glow. The waves darkened. It was as if the air itself began to tremble, and before our very eyes, the ship slowly vanished. When the experiment began, a powerful electromagnetic field formed around the USS Eldridge. As the generators came online, the sky darkened. The magnetic field was so intense that a mist began to rise around the ship, an electrically charged haze. Witnesses described seeing blue-green sparks flickering in the air. The ship gradually became transparent and then vanished completely. According to Navy records, the radar systems could no longer detect it. But within seconds, everything went wrong. Some of the crew began to experience severe dizziness and nausea. As the magnetic field intensified, the limits of the human body were pushed beyond endurance. Then suddenly, there was nothing. No radar contact, no visual trace, only a trembling distortion in the air and a deep, resonant hum. Minutes passed, and then, without warning, the Eldridge reappeared. But nothing was the same anymore. When the ship returned, part of the crew had lost consciousness, and some were no longer there at all. According to several witnesses, a few sailors were found fused into the metal of the ship, their arms and legs seemingly merged with the hull itself. Some had burned to death, others had simply vanished. Among those who survived, many had lost their sanity. Their minds were shattered, and the more they tried to describe what they had seen, the deeper they slipped into madness. The Navy immediately placed everything under strict secrecy. Records were sealed, witnesses were reassigned to distant bases. The Eldridge was quickly decommissioned, and the very existence of the experiment was officially denied. Official statement. It was a standard magnetic field test. No unusual events occurred. But the civilians who had witnessed that day at the harbor never forgot what they saw. Many told the same story for the rest of their lives, and one of those accounts became legend. There was a light around the ship, and then it was gone, as if it had passed somewhere else into another time. Years later, in the 1950 seconds, a letter surfaced. The sender, Carlos Miguel Allende. The letter had been mailed to researcher and writer Morris Jessup. Allende claimed to have witnessed the Philadelphia experiment himself. In his letter, he wrote, "I saw the Eldridge become invisible, but the invisibility was not merely physical. The ship stepped outside of space and time. When the crew returned, they were no longer the same." Jessup took the letters seriously. He began investigating, interviewing witnesses, collecting evidence. But soon after, he died under mysterious circumstances. The event ignited decades of conspiracy theories. Some claimed the experiment had opened a doorway through time. Others believed it caused a dimensional shift. Certain accounts even alleged that the Eldridge was seen minutes later in Norfolk Harbor, hundreds of kilometers away. The Navy, however, denied everything. No official records ever mentioned a project called the Philadelphia Experiment. But after the documents were destroyed, history fell silent. And sometimes, silence itself is the strongest evidence. The truth behind the Philadelphia Experiment remains controversial to this day. Some physicists argue that electromagnetic fields could never produce such an effect. They point out that Einstein's unified field theory was never completed, and that any attempt to apply it in this way would violate the very laws of physics. Yet others interpret the experiment as an early form of quantum manipulation. They suggest that magnetic fields might cause microscopic distortions in the fabric of space-time itself. And, if that were true, perhaps the Eldridge really did become invisible. But the question is not purely scientific, it is also ethical. When a human being dares to push beyond the limits of science, does he not risk taking the place of God? And does the pursuit of invisibility leave a scar not only on the body, but on the conscience of humanity itself? Behind the story of the Philadelphia Experiment lies humanity's oldest desire: to know, to control, to wield power. But sometimes, the price of knowledge is sanity. In 1944, the Eldridge was transferred to another base. After the war, it was sold to Greece, where it was renamed HS Leon. Yet, it was said that traces of the experiment still lingered within the ship's hull. Crew members spoke of strange occurrences: electrical systems activating on their own, unexplainable noises echoing through empty corridors. In the 1980 seconds, shortly before the ship was sent to the scrapyard, a photograph was taken. On the deck, a faint silhouette could be seen. Perhaps it was just an illusion, or perhaps an echo of the past. The Philadelphia Experiment is still officially denied to this day. But history is not always written in documents. Sometimes, it's written in whispers. And those whispers have never gone silent. There was once a ship. It vanished from a harbor. And perhaps it's still trying to find its way back. On Dark Matters of History, we bring light to the events history left in the dark. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next Dark Dossier.